it, it was more, that's the way I was coming at it. I agree with Ann, I don't think we should be reading every job description and analyzing every change that you want to make, or Mike wants to make.
Yeah.
There is language in the classifications section, that last paragraph there, the town manager or designee shall develop and recommend job descriptions specifying title, classification, etc. Each position is assigned a salary or wage range in accordance with the approved budget. So there is some discretion provided there, or oversight from the council.
Yeah, if others want to expand what's outlined in the charter as what we have discretion over to department heads, I'm okay with that, but I would agree, we don't need to be seeing every change on every employee in town.
And so then, if there's no more questions on that one, the next item is position changes under 4A personnel actions. As above, allowing the town manager to make changes to positions in accordance with the budget will lead to more efficient operations and quicker adaptation to organizational needs.
Sorry to back up, can I back us up just?
Sure.
Did we have a decision on that in the end? I mean, I'm
On hiring, yeah.
on the department heads.
Yeah, it sounded like the majority was in favor of seeing any job description changes related to department
Okay.
heads.
All right, thank you. Sorry, Michael, I just
That's
wasn't
okay.
clear about.
So just to clarify, so anytime we hire a new department head, the council wants to approve those job descriptions?
Or if we decide that,
Only if they change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, only if they're
If they're
different.
only if
changes.
they're changed, yeah.
Yeah.
And if they,
We don't
I
want to
mean,
be
if-
involved in in the hiring decision necessarily.
or if you want to restructure a department, and so that the department head's job would change, then I think the council ought to see that.
Yeah, that's my thought also.
Yeah.
So I'm just concerned that an administrative function is lying with the council. And I'm charged with overseeing department heads. And so that would leave an administrative function with you guys if you were going to approve department head job description. So if I find that there's a role and responsibility that the organization is lacking and we want to add that responsibility to a job description, I have to go through the council in order to do that. Or if there's one that we're shifting to another position, that's ultimately what would happen. It would be an administrative function that would lie with the council. And the charter's pretty clear about that.
Well, the existing policy is pretty clear too, that we have authority over reviewing job descriptions, and we want to.
And I think ultimately what I'm trying to
Pare that
do is
back.
make the policies kind of consistent with how we've been operating, which is something that has even been operating differently before I arrived, and to have it be consistent with the operation of the town as established in the charter.
Go ahead, Dan.
For me, yeah, it would be, in my mind, it's strictly if you want to change, we pass a budget, we've got a certain amount in payroll and stuff like that. If you want to change the pay scale, then I think that conversation goes to us.
So one of the things I'm going to propose.
But if you want to change the job description to clarify or modify it, personally, I don't feel a need to see that. It's more, again, for me, it's the finance.
Yeah, I mean, an example would
What
be
gets baked in.
when we were considering reorganizing, this has been Nick's, this plan, it was proposed before you arrived, Mike, but we were considering merging the transfer station director under a public works administrator role. That was something we were consulted on because it had a large budgetary impact and also shifted a lot of department head roles and responsibilities. But
It added a new position.
Right. So I guess I'm just, particularly the ones noted in the charter, I would be most concerned with those that have a significant impact on budgets going forward. That's would be my main concern also.
Yeah, and so it would be my goal with any budgetary changes to propose those as part of the budget.
Right.
And so then going forward, if we alter a job description and either hire a new person within the existing budget. We're charged with operating within the existing budget that's approved by the voters, because it's ultimately approved by the voters, so we have to operate within that budget. And so that's what we wouldn't be making changes to salaries. But one of the things I am gonna propose as part of the next budget, that both John and I recognize that the organization is lacking, is a wage scale. We don't actually have a wage scale, we just have an arbitrary range that's provided.
Yeah.
So there's no consistency among positions and there's no
Different
different years of service and different levels on the scale. And so I have some working with a wage scale from where I came from, and John and I have been working to develop that, to kind of prepare that as part of a future budget. So that way, we could bring that wage scale to the council to approve, and that gives you a scale of, for certain positions from point A to point B, of where those positions could be. So we, in addition to having a budget to work from, which we're charged with ensuring balances out, we would have a scale to work from. So there would be a consistency and equality amongst the pay scale. But that's not a change that we're proposing right now, because that would have a budgetary impact. Because we would want to make sure that all the employees that exist already are properly placed on that scale that we established, and that might result in some financial changes.
Yeah, often there are adjustments made when you implement something like that. I think that's a great idea, and I think it would address my, not concern's the wrong word, but it addresses the budgetary, the
Yeah.
financial component for me, which was unclear. So I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah. I mean, here's what I was thinking about being able to see the job description if it gets revamped. And I think Krista used a good example. That's the kind of, big change, like a merger of departments or creation of a brand-new department. And in part because I think the exercise of writing the job description and then for us being able to read it helps to clarify what the intent of that position or new department or whatever is. So it's, the council is certainly not wanting, I mean, the other, outside of what's identified in the charter, which are the tax assessor and the economic development director, in terms of staff and the town manager, but I'm not really interested in being involved in the hiring process. I don't think the town council needs to be doing that, but it's just really understanding, in part because when the voters come to us and say, why is this position changing, or why are we adding money to this position? I guess it just helps me understand kind of what it is that we're doing. But I don't know. I feel like we are evolving, and this is by no means a judgment on you, Mike. I think the council has been more involved perhaps than it ought to have been in the staff, in the town manager's proper functions than it should have been. And so we're trying to wean ourselves from that. But I think it does come down to, are we getting, I think Dan's concerns about fiscal impact are valid, but also are we getting what we all agreed to or agreed we wanted out of those positions, and that the job description kind of helps us go, understand that, and helps to pull us behind that. And so I don't know. I'm still.
I come back to just making reference to the jobs that we have oversight to, as outlined in the charter. That's where I land with that. But because that's where we have explicit duties.
Yeah.
And in the case that both you and Ann have been referring to, we did have a discussion because it was the creation of a new position, so there was a budgetary.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
component to
Yeah.
it.
And I think that would be up to the discretion of Mike and his team, if he felt they were significant enough to raise for budgetary reasons.
The only historical piece too, and I agree with Ann about the council being in the weeds and trying to extract ourselves, is things have been presented to us one way and then changed after the fact into something else that personally, quite frankly, I would not have agreed to had it been presented to me that way in the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's how those boundaries, I guess, between duties start to break down. a position is hired, it's pitched to be X, or the capability is pitched to be X, and then after it's funded and implemented, it changes dramatically differently into something that frankly I wouldn't have supported had that been presented that way. So maybe that's, you're never gonna weed all that out. I mean, that just, that kind of stuff happens, but.
Well, just to get us back on track, I think we should have this align with our duties as outlined in the charter. And if we go about our time here under this new policy and we're feeling conflicted about what we're seeing or things that are happening, we can always raise that as a concern and amend it at a future date. So,
I'm okay with that.
Yep, sounds good.
sorry, Mike, I know that was
That's
probably
okay.
longer than you were thinking.
They're gonna be.
And so the next one is nursing mother support. We've recently been working with some friends from Portland Public Health who received a grant to help other local communities with nursing mother support. And so we've added a policy to ensure compliance with the Maine Nursing Mothers in the Workplace Law and promotes a family-friendly workplace. And with that grant, we've gotten equipment and supplies that we will have here in Town Hall. So if we have a staff member that's nursing, we'd be able to support them with those. And we thank our friends from Portland Public Health for supporting us on that.
I just want to note that I think this is an excellent addition to our personnel policy to call this out as a support, so I appreciate it.
100%. Thank you.
And then compensatory time, we updated some clarifying eligibility and usage criteria, and this allows employees to better plan while meeting department needs.
Yep, I think the way it's written makes a lot of sense, personally. This and the flex time changes you're about to reference, the workforce nowadays is looking for job situations that provide more flexibility in general, and I think this just plays into that. So.
And specifically around compensatory time, most of these are just operational changes or minor changes. It's not a major change, but a community nearby took away compensatory time and their staff left and
Paid
came to
a
work
price,
here.
yeah.
And came to work here. So that's a benefit that we're learning is very valuable to people who usually work extra hours and work a lot of hours. And then the same thing with flex time. It allows employees' needs with operational goals and scheduling flexibility has become a top priority for many job seekers. And for instance, a number of staff who have evening meetings and things of that nature, if there's no operational impact, are able to adjust their schedules to best support their time.
Any questions?
I just have a question about the flex time. Are we on to that one?
Sure.
Yep.
Can I back us up to
Oh, yeah.
page 17 for a second?
You had something on
Under D for
compensatory.
illness,
Yeah.
you've struck the phrase of the town's infectious disease policy in reference to that. Does that mean that we no longer have an infectious disease policy?
No, it's part of my proposal to move that as a separate safety policy to the safety handbook.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So
think,
we have that further down.
yeah, that was later on in the memo, that was what.
And then
I missed that.
we have shift differential pay and compensation. This is an offering of shift differential pay incentives for employees to work during less desirable hours, ensuring staffing levels are during critical times. And this is something that's been happening, yet it has not been memorialized in policy.
Oh, did you have, sorry to stop you, did you have a question on flex time?
I did.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I note that in flex time, it's only for a single pay period. It's not intended to be like a ongoing arrangement. And I'll just note that when my children were small, my employers allowed me, like Maine Housing, in fact, I was working for Maine State Housing Authority at the time, and they allowed me to come in early and leave early so that I could get my kids before my daycare closed. And I didn't do it every day of the week, but for me, that was a tremendously helpful, family-friendly policy. And my husband had the same arrangement at Unum, so we were able to trade off that responsibility So I would encourage us to be more lenient on that flex time policy, especially for people who are caretakers, either of elderly or disabled family members or of children. I mean, I just throw that in there.
Yeah, no, it's something that I've been fully supportive of, to offer flex time for situations exactly like you described. But also, we didn't have anything documented, so we want to just have something documented, so that way we can do that. And then, another example is for department heads or salaried employees can't earn comp time. And so the flex time supports salaried employees. For instance, not to single out John, but John's staying here extra tonight
Right.
for this meeting. He can come in an hour late tomorrow or use that time during a pay period to support the extra time that he put in today.
Okay. That's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that as well.
So what's the expectation then for salaried employees as far as
So
hours are concerned?
The salaried employees are expected to work the hours of which they're scheduled for. And so if someone needs, the example like Ann gave, to come in an hour late because of childcare issues, they're making up that hour the next day or something to that effect.
So they're only expected to work 40 hours?
So it depends on what department is scheduled. So for instance, here at Town Hall, we're scheduled to work 36. At some other departments, they're scheduled to work 40. So it would all be based on what they're scheduled.
So you would give flex time after whatever that is? Or there's no expectation that someone should have to work longer than that?
No, there's no expectation, especially with a salaried employee, usually they're working extra, and most of us work extra, and we're not able to support flex time for every situation. But this gives us the ability to be able to adjust if and when we're able to, the operation is able to support it.
Can I make two distinctions? Flex time isn't intended to be a substitution for overtime pay or comp pay. It's intended to create more flexibility within the working schedule to enable salaried employees who really are charged with making sure that they're meeting business needs to do that.
It's a scheduling benefit as opposed to a length of work or
Right,
day benefit.
right.
Right.
The challenge and caution that I've received in recommending a flex time policy is that if there aren't any controls over the amount of the usage of that flex time, then it's very hard to administrate accruals. So vacation time, sick time, where are the boundaries?
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why we use the pay period. I've been told, don't use more than a week, but I think it's more practical within our bi-weekly pay period
To use
to
the-
administrate that.
That makes perfect
Yeah.
sense.
So that makes it narrow, so you don't have,
Right, it
Yeah, it's
doesn't
not
extend
endless.
out, you're
Yeah.
not keeping track of
Yeah.
someone's hours
I think that
6
makes
months
sense.
later.
Yeah.
Right.
yep.
Yep,
Shift differential?
Yeah, so sorry, shift differential, again, I mentioned this had already been being done, though it wasn't memorialized in policy. Primarily, it supports our transfer station operation where staff work on weekends. And so that's ultimately where it's being used right now, but we have that policy in place now.
I do want to mention that shift differential pay is provided to public safety as well, so I may want to include public safety on that list, as well as public works and the transfer station. But the transfer station and public safety have received shift differential pay for many years.
yeah.
So I think it's just a matter of documenting.
Where is the eligibility requirement criteria live for that? Is that something that's actually documented, or?
It would be based on the department needs as determined by the town manager.
Okay, so it's not anything that's memorialized anywhere?
It doesn't need to be documented beyond providing who establishes that
Who
eligibility.
has the responsibility?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And as we work to more formalize a wage scale and things like that, then maybe we'll have
There'll be
a
something.
scale or something
Mhm.
associated with that in the future.
Yeah,
So under vacation, under 7B leave, we're adding an option to sell back unused time. this acknowledges the diverse needs of our workforce. It also helps to ensure business continuity when max accruals are reached during peak seasons. And this is a very narrow ability, so you have to have taken time off. So what we're finding is a lot of times people are reaching that max, yet the operation can't really support for them to take that time off on like a last minute basis, so they don't reach their max. And so for people who have maxed out on their time, this allows them the ability to cash out, and this wouldn't have any necessarily budgetary impact because it would be fit within that person's salary for that fiscal year. And we'll monitor it into the future and see, but we found that, I think John said a number of years ago, there was the cap that was placed on the vacation time because there was the concern of the liability associated with that.
It was
Well,
being used as a retirement account for all
Yeah.
intents and purposes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so this kind of restores a little bit of flexibility to that, but doesn't allow it to become a retirement account. And where we have we budgeted in the HR budget for separation pay, and we could adjust that in future budgets to call it separation pay and cash outs if we recognize the cash outs are having. But there'll be a handful of employees that will be eligible for this. It will not be, but it'll help us to better manage operational things at times when people have capped out their time.
So are vacation accruals yearly, either like kind of under a use it or lose it policy currently? Is that how we're currently operating?
Once the maximum is reached,
Yeah.
depending on
Right.
your years of service.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is just allowing people to not, because we're not doing rollover of vacation accrual. This is sort of a way to honor those days they're not taking. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But only if you've achieved the goal of taking the time off, as it say. You have to
Right.
have taken, because the
8
purpose
hours
of
off.
time off is
Yeah.
to have time off,
Yeah.
to rest.
Of
and-
course,
and
everyone
so
needs time
You
off.
still have to take time off.
Okay.
So you can't just be like someone, I'm gonna never take any time off and sell back a week.
I see.
You have to have, it's a very narrow
I got it.
window.
Yeah.
of
That makes
the
sense.
ability.
No, I
Okay.
think that's the safety valve on the whole thing.
Yes. And so then sick time, under leave, we're adding language for sick time payout to include benefits eligible employees who have resigned and transitioned to non-benefits eligible status. Example of that is full-time firefighter to per diem firefighter, which we've run into, but we've had no policy to manage it. And then, so this ensures fair compensation while allowing continued service to the town.
So I had questions around this. On packet page 26, we've crossed out the reference to the date of October 1st, 2022. The way this was worded when we adopted it, the intent was to eliminate these payouts for anyone that wasn't employed in the town as of October 1st, 2022. So I think the changes we're making here are basically reinstituting these payouts for newer employees who are accruing 10 or 5 years of service or more.
Right. It was prior to so the language was written prior to the adoption of it. So it was specific to a particular date, right? And so if we remove this date, now that we've passed that date, then.
But we were trying to eliminate the payouts for new employees. So essentially, anyone hired after that date would not be eligible for these payouts. They would still be eligible for the 960 hours of sick time to be accrued,
Right.
but they wouldn't be receiving payouts upon separation of employment. And that was to address the liability issue that
Right,
we
so
were referencing.
removing the date doesn't change our ability to limit payouts. It was specific to a time period in which we wanted to create this change, but now that that date has passed, no one is being hired prior to that.
Right,
Does that make
but
sense?
those being hired are now, the way I'm reading this, and perhaps I'm reading it incorrectly, is by eliminating these dates, anyone hired after that date and is here, say, for 10 years, would be eligible for a payout for sick time.
No,
And
so,
that's-
so those policies that you made were as of that date. And so what John's saying is that as of that date is passed. So this is the policy that you created to start as of October 1st, 2022. And now that that date has passed, this is the policy. So it wasn't referencing employees hired before October 1st, 2022.
So I see why you're reading it that way, and I raised this when we were adopting it with Nate and Sandy and our lawyers. I was afraid that it was going to be read like that in the future.
Yeah.
And in fact, it is. The intent of it was to allow employees who had been hired prior to October 1st, 2022, who had achieved at least 5 years of service or at least 10 years of service to retain these payout benefits. But if you were hired after that date, you were not to receive the payout benefits for years of service under sick time. You were still allowed to accrue up to 960 hours of sick time.
So you were saying that the intent of the proposal was to not allow for any sick time cash out at all?
Payout upon
Yeah.
separation of
Okay.
employment, yeah.
Well, I
Beyond what
would-
the state requires.
If I knew that that was the case, I would argue against that because it would incentivize the usage of sick time, which would create an operational challenge.
Well, we
And
want
yet-
people to
That
use,
is also a performance issue, too.
but we want people to use sick time if they're sick. That's
Right.
that's the intention. People were using this, they were accruing it, and it was becoming a huge liability for the town because nobody was taking sick time, and they were just, it was like we also instituted this cap. People were going beyond that amount, and we had these huge liabilities for people that had been here for 20, 25 years and weren't taking a lot of sick time.
Well, so we've planned for the liability in the budget, and under separation pay in the new budget. But this even, it's really difficult to performance manage an employee that uses sick time.
It is. Oh, I've done it, so I know how hard it is.
I think it would, if you don't intend to offer any payouts for sick time,
Well, we
then
would
that-
for anyone hired before these dates who had accrued either 5 or 10 years of service, because that was the policy they were hired under. But-
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
But for new employees, you didn't intend for them to have.
Correct. That was the intention at the time. When we adopted it, and I believe it was December 2022 was when we adopted that change.
Just, so I understand, what you're saying is you're wanting to incentivize not using sick time.
No, I want.
No,
I-
not you, I'm talking to Mike, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
No, so so for instance, in some workplaces, they have this type of policy so people only use the sick time when they're sick. A lot of times,
Oh, I see.
in workplaces, people would, because they have the time on the books and they know they're not gonna get it when they leave, they'll use it if they need a day off. And we can't drive by everyone's house to ensure they're not out doing yard work on a day that they call out sick or something of that nature, because if someone chooses to take a mental health day, there's all those different types of sick days that can be taken. And if people know that they're never gonna get any of this, we'll never have employees leave here with a sick time balance. They'll use it all.
I don't think that's true, first of all, and I'm definitely with Krista on this. I would like to eliminate those payouts. Because in my mind, it incentivizes not using sick time, which
Yeah.
I don't think we should be incentivizing that.
Right, and I mean, that was the idea. People were not using their sick time, and they just were accruing these large pools of money that we would potentially have to pay out if they left voluntarily.
It's like saying-
Or they retired when we weren't expecting them to.
There's an incentive, especially given, the last 5 years' history, you're sort of saying, well, there's incentive to come to work sick. That's what it sounds like to me, and I don't support that. If somebody's, got the sniffles, I could go to work, but I don't feel well. I think we ought to be saying, stay home, and not saying, well, we'll pay extra if you come in even though you don't feel good.
And infect the rest of the office.
Exactly.
I think this is a type of policy that supports employee retention. And so I think if we completely change this, we'll be kind of going against the grain, and that's fine if that's what the council would like to
Well,
do.
we
We're not
did.
changing it.
we-
We
we
wanna
did-
keep it the same.
Yeah, we voted to change it, to eliminate the caps, or the payouts, rather, and institute this cap back in December 2022. And anyone who was employed here at the time was very well aware of the changes that were being made, so.
Well, I guess we'll have to go back and look at that, and talk to legal about that, because I just don't know what the implications are for if employees thought if employees who've been hired since October 1st of 2022 thought that they could cash their time out if they reached these milestones. Because at the end of the day, there's an operational impact. If people call out sick and they aren't actually sick, that costs the town money. And so policies like this are in place because it provides a hybrid. So it doesn't let you cash out all your sick time, it lets you cash out a certain amount. And so people are still using their time, but it allows them to be able to cash out some of it. And so I think in that case, we're really in a difficult spot where I don't know if everybody, for instance, I'm a new employee, and when I read the personnel policy before I started, I was under the impression that if I were to be employed here for 10 years,
That was Krista's complaint.
I don't know how many
Question.
times I raised that when we were considering the language, and we were told
So-
innumerable times by our attorney that it read that anyone hired after October 1st, 2022 meant that they were not getting these payouts. So yeah.
Would you agree that there's an operational cost to people coming to work sick?
I guess I don't want to debate the merits of sick time. I know that these types of policies are in place, and they've been in place from organizations, and if people come to work sick.
So you're not going to answer my question?
No, there can be an operational challenge to people coming to work sick. But we have dedicated employees that have critical functions. We don't have a lot of overlap in employee functions here in the town. So people know that a lot of people who work here know that if they're not here, nobody does their job. And so either the citizens don't get served or they get backed up on operations. And so people are really dedicated. So I'm not gonna debate whether or not it creates an operational challenge, but I'm also not gonna debate whether employees are dedicated. And these employees here are dedicated,
I'm not
and
questioning
they'll
that.
come to work if they don't feel well, if they need a mental health day and they don't take it. They'll come to work because they know that there's a negative effect. So there's negative effects on all fronts. And so this is not an uncommon policy in the public sector. And so if it's the desire to not offer this benefit to employees, that's fine. I'll look back at whatever the approvals were back then, and we'll ensure that that's documented appropriately in the future. I think it just, again, I gave an example of new employees. I'm a new employee. I thought that if I were to work here for 10 years, that's an incentive to manage my sick time. Yeah, can I accumulate 960 hours? But I can only cash out 360. So I'm not disincentivized to use, but it's an incentive to manage my sick time appropriately. Otherwise, I'm not saying that I'm going to do this, but other employees may use their sick time on a regular basis in order, knowing that they're going to lose it.
Yep. Dan, I'll come to you in just a sec. I just want to say, I think for now, we spent countless hours making this change about a year and a half ago. I would like to leave the language as it is today and perhaps revisit it for the reasons that you're outlining, Mike, at a future date. But I think it deserves and it warrants more conversation, and I don't feel comfortable making those changes kind of tonight with just so little conversation behind it personally. Dan, what?
Well, I think, yeah, the issue of someone's feeling duty-bound to do something or their own, will people abuse it? Maybe so, but that's not the assumption by any means. One of the reasons for the difference in the hours is that we don't offer short-term disability for anyone, for the most part. So the allowing people to save up to that larger number gives them some security from that standpoint while they're at work. But when they leave, I guess the council was basically saying, that's our insurance for you to some extent, but we don't expect that will all get paid out as income.
Just to clarify, we do offer income protection as an optional benefit to employees.
As an optional benefit.
And the main reason we felt we were warranted in making the changes at the time were because it had been flagged by our auditors in countless audits in years prior as a huge liability. And that was the impetus for the change originally. So I don't know how others feel about leaving the language as is and maybe revisiting this as a.
I think we should,
Yeah, no, I was just saying, let's revisit it later, leave it as is, yeah.
But I think we do want to revisit it and
Yeah.
and clarify the language to reflect the intent of the council.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think there's enough changes, we can continue to go through what we've done, but I think there's enough changes that it doesn't make sense to approve this at the meeting
Yeah.
later. Because for instance, if we have to restore this to what the intent of the council was, what the
Yeah.
intent of the council is not reflected in the old language.
You know, I agree. I
And so
never felt it was.
I've
but-
got to review that information and we've got to consider that with legal, because in that case, if that was the intent, without even me being here, that policy's probably had been violated because people had been paid out based on.
Well, if they had been here at least 5 years or 10 years as of October 1st, 2022, they were entitled to a
Yeah,
payout, so.
yeah. So
that-
we'll
yeah.
have to look back at that. I know John was eager to go through these personnel changes at our upcoming employee annual training, but we'll have to let them know that we can go over them and let them know they're in draft form, and try to clarify which ones are of concern for the council.
And I guess if the lack of clarity of the existing language is a problem, I wouldn't have a problem updating it to now forward, like to a current date forward, as
Yeah.
opposed to still relying on this October.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If
2022
there was
date.
a misperception in the language, I would consider that, but Dan's shaking his head no, so we might be in the minority, Matthew, I don't know.
Yeah, it's, every year the council changes, periodically the manager changes, and the managers bring with them, as the councils bring with them, different points of view. And these are the kind of things that we have to resolve when those changes happen.
Okay, well, let's move on for now.
Yep.
We
Yep.
can revisit.
Okay, on personal time, it specifies the allocation period to provide clarity and consistency in how personal time is managed. The language before wasn't clear.
What section was, oh, there, I found it. Never
It's
mind.
right after the
Yeah.
one we've been talking about.
Yep.
And then, is there any questions on that?
No, I noted, it's just changing it, or expanding the definition to elaborate on the fact that it's the fiscal year.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then under family and medical leave, under 7H leave, adding a mention of the main paid family
Yep.
and medical leave, which reflects a recent law change. How we administer that and manage that is still uncertain because it's in the rulemaking process right now. I think some draft rules have been published, but we won't be able to decide how we're going to manage that until
They finish, yeah.
Until they finish.
Yeah.
So under health insurance, under 8B benefits, we proposing, this is something that a number of other municipalities have, adding compensation in lieu of employer-provided insurance would lead to a cost savings for the town and more competitive benefits package, as this option is offered by other municipalities, as I mentioned. So this would allow employees who have a spouse who works for another employer, they could evaluate what employer has the best plan, and it would allow them to potentially not be on the town's insurance and allow for a cost savings.
Could you define appropriate for me?
Appropriate,
Under employees that can demonstrate that they have appropriate health insurance coverage elsewhere. What does appropriate mean in that
they
context?
have,
Determined by the ACA,
Oh, okay.
by
Yeah.
the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, I just actually went through this with my husband's new employer. So there's, your health insurance has to meet certain standards to be applicable for being affordable and appropriately covering all services, so.
And considered health insurance.
And for it to not be
Yeah.
considered catastrophic insurance.
Sure,
right,
sure,
yeah.
okay. I mean, did you want to footnote that in here? or is-
Not
no?
really.
Not really, okay. Just asking. Okay.
and then we just left this based on the single coverage. We didn't include this to also include the HRA, which we also provide. So this is just the single coverage.
How does this save us money, though? Because if someone has coverage somewhere else, they're getting covered, but then we're paying them 30% of what the benefit would be.
So a lot of employees they'll get single coverage at each employer if they know that there's no incentive to not have insurance. So then we would pay the full cost for that employee to have single coverage, and then the employee would get single coverage at the other employer.
Oh, they kind of like would double up their insurance coverage, essentially.
But they wouldn't have
They
a
wouldn't have
family
a family
coverage. Yeah, they
plan.
wouldn't have a family coverage. Or someone might get single with dependents without a spouse, and then just get the single here. And so in that case, if we have employees that are doing that, then we would lose out on that savings.
But if someone's got if my spouse has a family plan and you pay me 30% on what I would get as a single plan, then I'm making out on that deal.
You are, but the town's saving 70%.
There's an incentive for you to get insurance through your spouse's
Right.
employer.
I think what Dan's saying that is, if I were opting to not choose the single coverage here at town because I had access to a family plan through my spouse, they were never going to opt for that coverage anyway.
Yeah.
So if we're paying them 30% on something they were never going to take, then we're losing.
I don't see how that would be savings for us.
I'm in favor of having it, and I think there will be some instances where we perhaps end up paying more than we would have, but it's a benefit that people are not utilizing if they're choosing not to utilize it, and therefore their compensation is lower than some of their fellow employees. So I'm fine with having this as a benefit for folks. I might be in the minority.
No, I see
Yeah, no, I
it.
wouldn't support that.
We've got 2 yeses and
I think
1
I'd
no.
encourage, yeah, I'm supportive of it too. I think it encourages people to be insured and to use other benefits when they can.
There you go.
So like I said, a lot of these aren't just things that John and I are creating on our own. These are practices
Yeah.
that we've learned about, that are ways that incentivize us to better treat our workforce.
Yeah.
While also potentially not costing the town. And this is one of them. So then the next benefit is something that we've proposed to budget for as part of the next budget, which is under retirement, to add the main PERS retirement option in July of 2025. That enhances the town's retirement benefits to encourage candidates with municipal experience. By attracting and retaining top performers, the town can achieve cost savings related to reduced turnover and the need for ongoing recruitment. So what we're finding in some of our entry-level positions, or in even middle management positions, if they work in a municipality that has Maine State Retirement and they come here and that plan isn't transferable, then they view it as a lesser benefit. So we view this as a recruitment strategy long-term. Again, it's not going to go into effect today, and we'd budget for it. Ultimately, if it's not supported in the budget, then we would remove this policy. But we want to be able to show potential employees over the next year that we're contemplating adding it effective as part of the fiscal year 26 budget.
So I'm definitely supportive of budgeting for this change and additional retirement option for folks next year. I guess my one concern is if we put it in the policy without it being adopted in the budget, are we potentially misleading new hires and/or making promises that we can't follow through?
No, John's great at explaining to people the circumstances associated with that. So he mentioned that this was a policy change that we were going to propose. He's mentioned it to some potential candidates, but he said, hey, it's not been approved by the council, it's not been approved by the budget. And, we ultimately, in this case, there's not necessarily a huge increase in cost to offer this benefit, because we right now offer a retirement match using the Mission Square program of up to 9%. And so right now, the employer share of the main PERS is about 9%. So there's not necessarily going to be a huge increase in the benefits that we offer. So it might be a small change. So we actually would have to evaluate who would participate in it, and not everybody would participate in it. And so we don't feel it would be a significant budgetary impact.
Dan?
Would the Mission Square option go forward, or are you proposing converting everybody to main PERS?
It would be 2 options.
So you'd have one or the other?
Yeah, and that's again another thing that we've learned from municipalities, is having that option. So the main PERS plan is a defined benefit plan. where you're prescribed a certain benefit, where the Mission Square is like a 401K or an investment account, that you can control what you invest the money in and do those different things. And so they're two different vehicles, retirement vehicles, and most public employers offer both of them.
Okay.
Yeah,
Matthew?
Go
I
ahead.
support making main PERS an option, and I think, Krista makes a good point, though, about, maybe there should be some caveat in this language about,
Yeah, I wouldn't put it
Budget.
in until the budget passes.
Or you could,
Exactly.
yeah, put a caveat, like Michael said, like pending budget approval in
yeah, exactly.
June
We'll
2025.
craft some language.
Okay.
And then under education reimbursement, so this was an example of a policy that was a separate document that existed somewhere that John and I have decided to incorporate in. It's to integrate the policy for education reimbursement, and this will help support educational advancement and lead to increased job performance. This was also a council priority in their priorities, and we will plan, knowing that this policy is much more clearer, and in our personnel policy, we will plan to budget for that on an annual basis going forward.
And just to clarify, this is distinct from the collective bargaining agreement with the firefighters because they have a separate education reimbursement policy that works entirely differently.
Do we make that distinction here?
I don't think it says
Yeah,
that in
does
this
it?
section. It says.
Because
it
I-
You
in
could
the-
say that about the entire
Yeah.
personnel policy, really.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well,
So
it's- it
I don't
does
think
say
it's
it
necessary
explicitly
in this
in the previous.
Yeah, in the retirement
In the
section, it
retirement.
does say it.
In the retirement section.
Because their retirement, they have a special plan.
Right.
Oh,
They
instead
have
of
main
the,
PERS special
instead of
plan.
the regular plan, or whatever
Yeah.
it's called.
We could include a note here that, about it not being the same plan as the firefighting.
Well, you could,
collective bargaining.
you could put something at the very beginning of the policy, just as a note or something. that
Yeah, unless
says-
otherwise noted, this.
Just a thought. I mean, if you don't like
Yeah.
that, that's fine, but I mean, and rather than having it occur in 15 places in the document.
I think there's a note in the fire contract that references conflicts with personnel policy that the contract supersedes.
The recommendation that I received from the attorney was basically if there is a benefit that could potentially conflict with the CBA, then we need to note it. But if there's no conflict and it's understood to be distinct, then it's basically potentially a benefit that a firefighter would be eligible for. So the use of vacation time, for instance, they're eligible for that as
Sure.
well. But it's not specifically lined, they don't have all of the same language that we do. in
You
our
gotta draw
policy.
the line somewhere, so
Right.
if this is where you wanna draw it, I'm okay with that. I
Yeah.
just was thinking maybe it would be easier than having multiple references, but yeah.
Matthew?
This is just a language comment, I guess. It's not on the substance, but at the top of page 30. And this would be a blanket statement on my part, I guess, where you say approval of her department head. I think we ought to go with, gender-neutral language. There's no reason why that couldn't say approval of their department
I
head.
think that's right, yeah.
And I think that's a blanket thing I'd like to see on all policy and ordinance language myself.
We had been changing those in the past, but there are still some
Yeah.
skeletons in the closet.
Right, but
We-
this
we'll
is new
look-
language.
We'll look for
with-
those. We apologize for that oversight.
Yeah.
No, it's
okay.
not.
No,
It's not
this was an
overly-
existing
No
policy.
need for apology.
Yeah.
But to John's point, this was an existing policy, we just incorporated.
Yeah.
We took the policy that was its own document.
I see.
And we copied and
Just-
pasted it into the personnel policy. So
Got it.
we'll tweak that.
So-
It's like our ordinances, they have different voices depending on who wrote them and when they were written. so.
And just to mention the conflicts with the contract, as the fire contract's in its first year and having extensive experience in negotiating labor contracts, those contracts will evolve and there'll be benefits that conflict that they likely will be better than the personnel policy. So those will be, that'll be a common practice probably in the future.
Okay. Safety?
And then all these next few changes are all related to safety, and so we're integrating language into a standalone policy about safety to ensure clear and understanding of the committee's responsibilities for the safety committee, to workplace safety and risk management. And then we've compiled all our safety-related policies and programs into a separate handbook that can be updated as needed to reflect current best practices and regulatory requirements. So we don't need to bring those back every time those are updated. And a lot of times those are, we're pushed to update those by MMA Risk Management and our insurance carriers. And so we want to make sure that we do that on a timely basis. And then this also integrates standalone policy to ensure all employees are well-informed and prepared to handle safety concerns under the safety training.
Is there anything in here about violations?
Of the safety policy?
Yeah. I don't see that there's any expectation of compliance or, again, from a performance standpoint, you're dependent on the personnel policy to resolve problems. You don't like to think you're ever gonna have them, but
If it states that these safety standards must be met, and it does, and what personnel should do, then
That's all you need.
when they do contrary to that, then it's a performance
Okay.
issue. Yeah,
Thank you.
That's what I would suggest.
Okay.
And then also under safety, we added the workers' compensation. We updated procedural language from the town's workers' compensation carrier for clarity and compliance. For infectious disease, which you mentioned at the beginning, we removed that to the safety policies handbook.
one quick thing, your OSHA Form 300 under D1 there, a lot of your forms and things looked like there were links. Did you want that to be a link too?
Yes, that was the intention.
Okay.
We'll fix
I'll make sure that's
Yeah.
live, yeah.
And this is great, I'm sorry to, I did struggle, I will admit, with the packet in finding all the references that you had, so this is really helpful. Thank you.
For that reason alone, it makes sense for us to take this
Yeah,
up.
kicking the ball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then CDL testing, this is a new policy that reflects existing procedures complying with federal testing requirements that ensure our CDL drivers meet the necessary safety and operational standards. And then federal FMLA, under Appendix A, we streamlined the language to make it easier for employees to understand.
Can I ask a sort of I guess, an operational question about the CDL testing? In the world where cannabis is legal, how does that work?
Because it's still currently federally illegal.
So what happens when someone tests positive?
They violated the
They
license.
lose their license?
Yeah, they
Yes.
violated the CDL license requirements.
Okay.
We understand there's some-
Alcohol's legal too, but there's alcohol testing in this, right?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
understand
but-
there's some changes maybe coming to the effect for that.
Alcohol leaves your body in a significantly shorter period of time than cannabis does, so I was just curious how that works.
Yep.
Yeah,
There may be some laws changing in that
Yeah, I'm
area.
sure there are, it will be, yep.
okay.
When those change, we'll bring them forward.
That's right.
I just want to note, if we're leaving the sick time accrual cap at its current language with the October 22 date, or however we amend it to actually read the way we intended to, on packet page 62, we have the table that outlines
Yeah.
that information. We might need to update that to reflect the retaining the current status quo. And packet page 63 also.
Or on the policy itself, yeah. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was those tables were in there before.
Yeah, I
And
don't,
so those
I recall
reflected-
the date being noted there. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, so the date is here. But for one of them, but not for the others, which it should have been.
Which one?
It's on the
Oh, the
ones
accrual cap.
the less
Yeah.
than 5 years of service. Or, yeah, it says see above, so right, the accrual cap, and then also,
So it was employees who have an excess of the cap as of October 1st. That's what it said on here. that had an excess. So we'll
Right,
look into
yeah.
that. I'll try to find the date of when that was previously discussed and.
Well, I know we
Look at-
adopted
look at
it in December of 2022, according to the amendments that are
Okay.
noted, so.
We'll look into that and get a legal interpretation and opinion on all
Okay,
that.
hopefully they come back with,
And so it would be my
Accurate.
recommendation that the council meeting later, we just table this item.
Yeah.
And if it's okay with you, we'll present, mainly, most of the stuff we're concerned about is the safety policies. It doesn't appear there's any objections to that, so we'll present some of these draft changes at the employee training day, knowing that the council is gonna consider these at a future date.
sure, that makes sense.
We don't know what that date will be, so,
As soon as possible.
yes.
Okay, so on the agenda this evening, we also had a conversation about what you found in regards to the caregiver retail stores for cannabis.
Yeah, if I could report out. So, before, so as I talked about with the last time we did a land use ordinance amendment, which was the ADU item, I wanted to bring this to a workshop before we referred it to the planning board to consider a public hearing, and then before it comes to the council for first and second reading. So there's a number of opportunity for public participation. So in speaking with our legal counsel has suggested that we, is the track changes one in here? Did that one get missed too?
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah, I
see
didn't see any
track changes.
No,
changes.
there's nothing in here at all.
I thought it was just showing us what we had already.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so you'll see the, in the text, anywhere that we removed caregiver retail store from being in the prohibited uses.
Okay, that was in
And-
there.
Yeah, and so so legal counsel recommended the seamless, we have a fairly restrictive and narrow medical cannabis policy as it is. So legal suggested we remove that from the listed of prohibited items. And then under each section of the ordinance where you saw registered caregiver cultivation areas, caregiver retail stores has been added. So
Okay.
the ordinance is completely the same as it was for all other medical cannabis. We've just simply added the same under caregiver retail store. So they're subject to the same distance requirements, they're subject to the same zoning requirements, they're subject to all the hours of operation requirements, everything on there. Caregiver retail store was added and outlined. So it's still a fairly narrow policy based on the current policy as it is, and so all the zoning standards would apply. And then we added under the allowed uses, caregiver retail store is also added, which is the checkbox. The checkbox is at the end with the different allowed sections. And so those, basically, caregiver retail stores will be subject to the entire same ordinance. They would also still remain subject to their appropriate laws and regulations associated with the state, the Office of Cannabis Policy.
Now, I did attend one of the MMA workshops on cannabis laws for municipalities. It was a while back, so I don't remember all the details, but can you give us an explanation of what the difference is between a medical cannabis registered dispensary and a caregiver retail store? Like, what's the major differentiator there?
I'm not an expert in that. I don't know if if you would allow, maybe one of our friends in the audience might be able to explain the difference to us.
Yeah, if they'd like to come up.
Yeah, if,
you can come
just come to the podium and introduce yourself, and if you can explain the differences between those.
If you would just introduce yourself and state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Winslow Maxwell. As far as my understanding, the difference between a caregiver establishment and a retail store establishment is that on a retail store establishment, there is additional licensing that is required through the state, and also they are allowed to have an open sign. Patients are allowed to freely walk in and out as they so choose during hours of operation. As far as a caregiver, we are subject to requiring a appointment being made via email, via phone call, some sort of communication that can be recorded, stating as such that an appointment has been made. And it's basically restricting as far as open access to the public.
Yeah, and you can't have multiple people in your establishment at the same time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And so legal suggested that this mechanism was the most simplest and easiest way for the town to be able to venture into that. So it's still a fairly limited use within the town, just as the other allowable uses are. And we don't feel that it would be an adverse impact. And we know of a couple of operators that are interested in this, and they'll have to manage the free market system in this sense. Legal also didn't recommend any licensing provision, because if we were to establish a licensing provision, we should establish it for everything. And that would be a comprehensive, extensive creation of an ordinance.
So, I'm comfortable moving forward with this minor change, seemingly. I would still like to revisit this overall, though, to have a larger conversation about potentially opening this up more than we are currently. I don't know.
Okay, so you're interested in exploring the other ones that are prohibited?
Yeah.
Okay.
so- But I think this is a good step forward to begin with.
So would you be supportive if we make this step, see how it all sets in, and then come back at a later time?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. Yeah, I don't know, if Matthew had.
Through your discussions, it's clear that these changes will address the concerns that we've been hearing at the council meetings from people that want to do this.
I mean, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
It will address at least part of their concern.
We believe it would.
Okay.
It doesn't allow them to operate everywhere in the town.
Right.
Just as the current cannabis uses aren't allowed to operate anywhere in the town. So we feel that it'll address the concerns that we've heard from folks in the community.
Right, and it doesn't allow for recreational stores or even
Oh,
medical dispensaries, seemingly.
I understand, but
Yeah.
it's a step towards alleviating some of the concerns we've heard.
I thought that was the case, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dan?
Yeah, on packet page 118, where he talks about on-site consumption, I didn't see in that particular instance anything where it talked about, well, I guess it does have registered caregiver. Was that new language to this line?
No, that line was there, and legal advised that by state law, it's prohibited at caregiver retail stores. So we don't need to cite state law in here, because that's already cited in state law. Because I had to put in the draft language, with the exception of caregiver retail stores, because the state law prohibits consumption at caregiver retail stores.
I think that's kind of confusing, though, because it does have caregiver in it, and I don't think people are gonna,
It doesn't have caregiver retail stores, so registered caregiver is a different use.
I guess I understand that now, but I don't think that's clear in the ordinance that there are other variations on the theme that, for which it's not allowed. So from my standpoint, I think that's a little confusing, or certainly at least not enlightening.
So you're asking that we list all of them as we have done in other parts of this ordinance?
That's my suggestion, but it sounds as though you've received a different.
Yeah, I put that in because I knew that caregiver retail stores consumption was not allowed, and I put that in there, and legal had advised against it. But I can push them
Could
for
we-
a better recommendation.
Could we reference the state statute that you said it includes that prohibition, or instead of,
But noted or something,
I don't know.
You know, it's kind of like everything that comes from legal, isn't it? I mean, they suggested the dates we had for the caps on we're fine, so I think it's, it's still a judgment call. It's not a super big issue for me. I raised it because I thought it was confusing. If it's not an issue for everybody, I suggest we just move on. The other one I wanted to talk about was 4, odor management. We have a lot of language in there. I'd be curious to know how we would manage that.
You mean, how do we enforce any
Yeah.
violation of odor?
Yeah.
So code enforcement has been dealing with that at current establishments in the community, and they have a process for which they are able to provide feedback to operators about what to do with that, and they've been successful thus far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't really speak to that process in the ordinance here.
Yeah. And there's a formatting error there too, right? With the
Yeah.
indent.
Oh.
from
Yeah,
3 to
the
4.
4 should be over.
4 and 5.
4 and 5.
No.
I think all these are really good points, but perhaps we could revisit some of the, like, enforcement issues and things when we come back to looking at this a little more, in more detail. I think if we move forward with just adding reference to caregiver retail stores without really getting into the weeds of amending all the other language, I think I'd be comfortable with moving forward with that. I don't know.
Okay.
And I can fix the formatting error for
Yeah.
submission to the planning board.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not substantive.
Yeah, I mean, regarding odor management, there's certainly one business that I go to regularly that is, very evident.
Yeah.
There's the odor of cannabis. And I don't believe it's coming from that business. I believe it's coming from an adjacent business. And I've actually had somebody say to me, like, why do they smoke so much weed in there? Because, that's the first impression you would get is, oh, there's a bunch of dope heads in this store. When it's got nothing to do with that store at all. And so,
Yeah.
and I get no problem with people smoking dope, but,
Yeah,
there is an issue, I think.
Yeah, I know where you're talking about. I frequent that location, also not the cannabis store, but the places around it, and it's a
Yes.
very prevalent
Yes.
odor. So
Yeah,
I do
exactly.
think
I don't frequent the cannabis store.
I do
It's the
think
store adjacent to
it
it.
has gotten better, though. To Mike's point, I know that code has been talking about it, and I do think it is a little better. But
We've been working with one operator
Yeah.
as recently as last week.
Okay.
Right.
So.
Can I just
Yeah,
ask
go
a
ahead,
question? So I support these changes. I think this is just a quick and easy way. Seeing nods from some of the interested people. But I also just want to clarify, so basically, there's no cap on the number of establishments that could be located here. They just have to meet the site location criteria. And I guess the market then will decide. I do think I would be distressed to see, a couple dozen of these establishments in the town, or just lots and lots of them. I think I'm not sure the market has fully caught up to, or has really sorted the number of establishments. As I move around Maine, the towns that have, not capped it clearly, have just, seem to have a lot of establishments, especially on main thoroughfares. I'm thinking of like Bridgeton is one example, where I go through fairly regularly. And I'm a little concerned about that because it's just too much of one. But on the other hand, we also don't limit the number of hardware stores or the number of pizza establishments, and we've had more than enough of the, pizza places
I think
too.
those towns that are facing those challenges are allowing more of the recreational storefronts and also the regular medical dispensaries where you can have multiple people in there rather than just one at a time. So
Yeah.
I would think that, and we can see how it goes, but I would think that we wouldn't really see that as much with this type of retail store where it's limited to caregivers.
I think if you drive through Wyndham, there's definitely, both medical and retail, some in one location, I think.
But they're recreational retail not.
No, there's some medical ones as well, I think.
But I don't think that they're and I could be wrong, I don't think they're the caregiver type. They're
Oh, right.
they're the medical
Good point.
dispensaries.
Yeah.
Distinction, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what other business would we be worried about if there was a bunch of businesses that started?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there's gonna be fallout from, market changes in the future, no doubt. But I don't think we should concern ourselves with that, with trying to cap the number of stores or anything like that.
So it sounds like you have consensus to move forward with adding the caregiver retail store language, and then I think, again, we should revisit perhaps, how we feel about expanding this in the future.
Okay, we can do that. I don't know if you want, I know there's some folks who came from operators in the community, if you want an opportunity for them to provide any feedback on the proposals.
Yeah, we didn't have public comment in the agenda, but we have a few minutes here if anyone would like to come up. Just ask that you limit your comments to about 3 minutes because we don't want to run over too much.
Hi, Brandon Pollard, Mayall Road. I'll keep it quick. Yeah, I totally agree that this should be kind of pushed forward as soon as we can. I personally have been coming in for a long time. I know I'm not the only one, but we're reaching, a frustrating level of time here. As far as caregiver storefronts go, I think look at the language because you may just be writing up what's already happening. A caregiver can supply product to patients from their locations, and that's what we've got in downtown where there may be some smell complaints, and we've got it over on the 100 side as well. We want patients to be able to come in freely, and that's really the sticking point is we want people to be able to come and go from our store, browse the store, stay for 10 minutes if they need to make their decision on what they're going to be purchasing, because these aren't just, walk in, I'll take one of those and see you later. A lot of these people are trying to hone in on specifically what this medicine is doing for them. And so it might take some education, it might take a little time, it may take a little research. And, I often go to, I wholesale, and so I go to a lot of these dispensaries and storefronts, and I speak with a lot of people about their needs, and everyone's needs are different. And so there's a wide variety of product, and they need time. And so to limit this to one patient at a time, appointment only is, first of all, going along the point of consumption. Town ordinance can't supersede state law. Well, state law says you can't consume in these places. So that's kind of a moot point. And that goes along a little bit of the same aisle as a very narrow caregiver retail, unless you say that we're allowed to open up as a dispensary style. It's still one patient at a time. It's still make your appointment, and it doesn't offer a very comfortable experience for, somebody that, is maybe waiting outside. And these are very relaxed areas to go to and to purchase products from. And I just feel like I'm very happy that the workshop is happening. I'm very happy that we're moving forward. I really just feel that, maybe 5-6 months ago when we were talking about doing a committee, that might have been the right thing at the time to get some people with the insider knowledge in to speak about and to bounce things off of others and come up with a consensus. But we're at the point now where, we're workshopping it, we're trying to move it forward because there are a lot of things on this council's plate, and this just happens to be one that I'm passionate about, and I keep coming in, and I know I'm probably a little bit of a thorn, but I also don't want to kick the council in the shins, open up my store, and then say, well, what are you going to do? I'm getting appointments. it's on the same property as I'm, you know, facilitating my, my grow, and town ordinance can't supersede state law, so I'm not breaking any rules. And that's why we already have some in the town, and the town can't necessarily do anything about it, and they're dragging their feet about it and this and that. So I just encourage you to understand the simplicity of the law when you can separate really what OCP, with the Office of Cannabis Policy, has in place for, you know, the medical program and its dispensaries and its caregiver storefronts and that kind of thing. You know, I'm all about the free market. I feel that if your, you know, consumer likes the place, likes the people, is getting the best deals and getting great product, and they're gonna go there. I don't necessarily think that Gray has the populace for, you know, 9 stores to come in and open up. You might see 5 at some point. You might see 6 at some point. But that doesn't mean that 6 are gonna stay. The current cannabis, the current cannabis marketplace right now is like any other marketplace. People don't have the free money to go and spend as they did when we were getting, you know, stimulus checks, and there was really a big boom. The boom before that was probably 2016. There was a big spike in it, but it always self-regulates itself. It has in a lot of the towns like Wyndham, Bridgeton, all the way through. I know that's a big hot corridor because there's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of people coming through.
If you could just
Yeah,
wrap up, because we have
okay.
to start our other meeting.
I'll speak with
No, you can finish your thought if
Yeah,
you want.
no, that's it. I
Okay,
just,
yeah.
you know, I'm happy that it's happening. I just want the language to be proper so that anyone can just do it, because really at the simplest level of caregiver retail storefront, it's basically saying if you're growing on the property, you can sell in that space. And if somebody wants to, say, sell in a different space, they have to have the proper licensing, they have to get signed off by the town and then go to the state, and that's where we need to be. But I know that's where you're trying to get. There just needs to be some tweaks in the language, so.
Okay. Noted. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else like to make a quick comment? No? Okay. I will adjourn our workshop at 7:02 PM. We're just going to take a 5-minute break before our next meeting, so we will see everybody back here at 7:07 for our regularly scheduled council meeting. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the final council meeting of this council session of June 4th, 2024. This meeting is being held in person and online with a link provided in the agenda header, which is available on our website on the meeting portal. I'll begin with roll call. Councillor Gass.
Present.
Councillor McGuire.
Present.
Councillor Meany.
Present.
Councillor Height.
Here.
And I'm Councillor Chapel, and to my right is Town Manager Michael Foley. If everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
It's in the right place.
Oh, no, it's over here.
It's in the right, this is the right place.
I pledge allegiance to
The flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Who's right?
I was finally
Which right is it?
I was gonna turn to the right corner, or the other
Yeah,
corner.
that happened at the school too when I was there.
So does anyone need to remove what's under the consent agenda, which happens to just be the minutes for May 21st, from the consent agenda for edits?
I don't have any.
I don't have any.
I don't have.
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as is.
So moved.
Second.
I'll give it to Dan. Go to vote. Matthew?
Yes.
Marty?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. All right, next up is public comments of non-agenda items. Comments are intended for information sharing, not discussion. Comments in excess of 3 minutes are welcome at the end of the agenda prior to adjournment. Anyone here for that? Yeah, come on up.
Lacey Antonson, resident of Gray. I live on Lake Avenue. I wanted to thank Ann Guess and Krista Chappelle and Marty Meany for being on the town council. I realize two of you have your seats up and are for re-election. We hope that you are re-elected. Thank you, Marty, for your time. The two important things, not that you're not important, but the biggies were, since you're repaving 115 East, I think it's a good opportunity to consider when you stripe that road, could the town somehow have the incentive to restripe the roads feeding into the village to make them narrower now rather than waiting 3 years when it all looks pretty? So could you restripe them? Because narrowing the lanes is a very critical piece of the village improvement plan. So please consider that. And then as far as retail stores for caregivers, back on September 22nd, 2023, on a Gray New Gloucester Facebook page, someone said, what kind of stores and things do we need in Gray? And this is what I will share with you. So I captured all of the comments. There were 161 replies. 48 of them agreed with the statement, no weed stores. Only 2 people agreed with the statement, pot shops. What they really, really, really want, if there's any way to make this happen, is a breakfast place that you sit down that's open weekends. Two Moms is our most recent diner, but they're not open the weekends and they don't serve breakfast. So people really, really, really want a breakfast sit-down place. They do miss Kohl's and things like that. They also want a swimming pool, minor, and they also want a gym, but we recently got a gym. So the biggest takeaway is 48 people on that reply said no weed stores. That's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Lacey. Anyone else here for public comment of non-agenda items?
Pam Wilkinson, Birchwood Road, Gray. In her comment about pools, swimming pools, we have a lake. We have Crystal Lake, and I used to teach swimming lessons there. We had 250 kids every summer go through that lake. I think we should, in a recreation committee, reinstitute programs for swimming for kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Last call for comments on non-agenda items. Okay, seeing none, I will close comment period at 7:13 p.m. And next on the agenda is a presentation by the Little Sebago Lake Association and representatives from St. Joseph College regarding water quality work being conducted on Little Sebago Lake.
Point of information, were we going to remove the policy, the personnel policy, or?
We'll table that.
Oh,
when we come to it.
yeah, it's
Oh,
not an
weird.
adjustment, though. We can just table it at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So, thanks, though, for remembering that.
Pam Wilkinson again from Gray, Maine, and this is Jan Slack. She's taking over our water quality program for the Little Spago Lake Association. I'll do a little introduction. First of all, I want to say thank you for our town manager for being at the American Legion Hall for Memorial Day. Did a wonderful speech. It was really good. It was nice to see that. I'm Pam Wilkinson. I grew up on Crystal Lake and have been affiliated with lakes for 73 years. So I would like to just say that I also have been involved with town politics, have been ordinance review, recreational committee, the planning board, council chair at one point. So very familiar with ordinances and how it works. And then I would like to introduce Jan Slack, who will be doing most of the talking tonight.
In contrast, I have nothing to do with politics and don't know anything about it. But I do a little science. Thank you for having us here tonight. Thank you for all the support you've given the Little Spago Lake Association in the past. Let's go to the next slide. We have a wonderful resource in Little Sebago Lake. We're lucky to have it in our community. And on some level, we all already know what a wonderful resource it is. I hope each of you have the opportunity in person to enjoy Little Sebago this summer. And in that regard, I'm going to invite you as a group to come on a boat tour of the lake with us. We would love to show you around. There's lots to look at. We can do that at your convenience. Get in touch with either of us to set that up. I hope you can do it. There's a lot of beauty involved in Little Sebago. I guess you guys can see that, right? Let's go to the next slide. There's also a lot of fun on Little Sebago. And one more slide. And let's
More fun?
fun. And let's be honest, there's also tax and business revenue created by the lake. We are very fortunate as a community to have this resource. My job here, let's change the slide. I'm going to have trouble with that, but my job is to remind you of the responsibilities that go with the resource. The key to continued benefit from any lake is the quality of the water. Without that, all those other good things go away, right away. And we all have a responsibility to maintain what we have. So that's what we're here to talk about. Let's have the next slide. You can see that Little Sebago has beautiful clear water. You can even see through inches of ice, which is what this photo is, to see the lake. It's that clear. One more slide. When you look at these images, you can see the sandy bottom of the lake in a lot of different places because we have such great clear water. But Little Sebago is under unprecedented pressure that makes it difficult to maintain the quality of water. So what is the pressure on the lake? Two things, weather and people. We're going to talk about those two things in a minute, but first I want to tell you about our wake-up call. So the weekend of May 4th and 5th, all of a sudden, a large part of the lake had brown, murky water. It was actually so Little Sebago was in 3 basins. It was the middle basin, pretty much the entire gray portion of the middle basin, brown and murky. If you can switch the slides, this is what it looked like in comparison to those other ones. It turned out to be an overgrowth of algae. It was the first wide-scale problem like that has been on Little Sebago in many, many years. Let's look at another picture. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So we knew that water quality in Little Sebago was going downhill slowly. Now we know that it's gone a lot further downhill than we knew about. We actually were lucky in this case. If we can go to the one last slide of how ugly it was. After about 4 smelly days, the algae started to die off. After about 8 or 9 days, there wasn't much evidence of it anymore. So it went away fairly quickly this time, we can't anticipate that that might happen again when this happens again. So why did it happen? I'm going to go right back to weather and people. So first, weather. Let's go to the next slide. This is a picture of the lake with open water in January of this year. So this is where you should be looking at a lake full of ice and people fishing and skating and all having fun. Little Sebago didn't freeze over until January 21st, much later than the typical December date. And then the ice was gone by March 11th. So we had a total of only 7 weeks of ice cover on the lake. Ice cover on the lake is very important for the quality of the water. It gives the lake a rest, what we call a resting period. And we like to see 4 months. We had 7 weeks. March and April this year was warm for that time of year. And what happened is the water in the lake that hadn't been frozen very long warmed up a lot quicker than usual. And that, along with the presence of the algae, created the algae problem that we had in the spring. Of course, we can't change the weather. We might want to, but we can't. But we can change number 2, people. And that's the only way we can prevent problems in the future. So let's switch to the next slide. This is a picture of the lake and the watershed. And we're going to see if this little thing works. Yeah, sort of. No, can't see it, can you? They can't see that, though. Well, anyway, the green area on the slide is the watershed. So what that means is all the land that's green drains into the lake. Anything that happens to the water in that area ends up impacting the lake. So it's a much larger area than the actual shoreline of the lake itself. And I can't, well, so on the lake map itself, the algae problem extended from here all the way down to there. So a big chunk, I would say half of the middle lake, probably in gray. Okay, so let's talk about the number one source of pollution in a lake is from runoff. So runoff is any water that enters the lake from the surface of the land instead of from the sky. Okay, our goal is always to eliminate as much as possible water running from land into the lake, because it always carries with it some sources of pollution. We're going to use grass as an example of what runoff does. So runoff is anything that, I use my hands a lot, anything that runs into the lake. We think of grass as really a great thing to plant, but what happens is grass has a very tight root system. And so if you get any kind of rain that's more than just a light shower, it is not absorbed easily into the grass because of the root system. It tends to run off the top. So most people don't know that. They think grass is this great thing to add around the lake. And it looks pretty, but it's very damaging to the lake itself because the water can run right off the top. And let me give you the obvious conclusion. The more lawns and grass we have around the lake, the more threatening the water quality is because of the potential for runoff. Okay, let's see. We're going to talk next about water clarity. That is how, the term that says how far down into the lake can you see. The further down, the healthier the lake in general, the more the clarity, the healthier the lake, and vice versa. So you can't see in very far and there is something going on. We've been measuring clarity on Little Sebago for 40 years. So I actually have a graph that kind of shows us that. It's a pretty complicated graph, so I want you guys to bear with me. there's an easy explanation for the complicated graph. So if you can change the slide. And I might, he didn't catch me. There we go. I'm gonna come over here. Now, back.
Yeah, you have to,
afraid-
yeah, you have to, the mic is over there, so you have to stay there, unfortunately. We can see it, and
All right.
some of us have it on our computers.
Yeah, we have it in a handout.
So, oh, that's right. Every symbol on this graph is a time when the clarity was tested, and this is the Upper Basin only, over the years. So the lower the dot on the graph, the better the clarity. It's kind of like if you looked from the top of the graph and imagine it's the top of the lake, you're looking down in, you want the numbers to be low on the graph. Do I need this?
If you want to
Yeah,
move
if you wanna
around, you
come up
you
here.
can use
Oh,
the.
okay. I'm good now. Across the top, you can maybe see that all the black dots started in about 1970-something and ended a few years ago. So each black dot represents a clarity reading. But the most important thing on this chart are those little red dots. And I hope you can see them, they're across the top. Those little red dots were the clarity reading in the upper lake last summer. And notice where they are. They're very low clarity, some of the worst readings we've ever had. I want you to hear the trend that we're talking about here. The clarity in 2023 was worse than in previous years, all over the lake, and the Upper Basin was the worst of all. So, not good news. 3 years ago, after we were reviewing trends and clarity and some of the other chemistry that we do, we knew we had to start looking at water quality and protecting the lake, and we had to do more. So we started a partnership with St. Joseph College to help us sample and test the water for some new chemicals that we weren't able to do ourselves. And in this partnership, the association gets sampling and analysis done, and the St. Joseph students get training and they get practical field experience in science. Unfortunately, they weren't able to be here today. We worked them hard today out in the field getting samples, so they could not come tonight. We now have 3 years of data on phosphorus, chlorophyll, and pheophytin in the lake and in each basin. Last year, we added phosphorus monitoring of the streams that enter into the lake. Let's switch the slide. Here we are with St. Joseph's students out on the lake. Let's switch the slide one more time. Lake water quality is a very delicate balance of a lot of factors, and it's a balance on the level of molecules. So obviously, it's hydrogen and oxygen. And then there's tiny amounts of other elements mixed in or floating through the water. So the element that matters the most for water quality purposes, it's the culprit, the enemy, the thing we don't want to see, is phosphorus. So you've probably heard that before. Let me tell you the reason. It's because in most lakes, there's everything present that tiny little life forms need to grow, except phosphorus. All the other things that they would need are right there in a lake. So if you add phosphorus to the lake, you then have a perfect place for the growth of little tiny things. Algae is a little tiny thing that we don't want to see in overabundance. It's there, it's always there, but we don't want to give it an ideal environment. The more phosphorus that gets into the lake from anywhere, the more algae and the more algae problems we're likely to have. So phosphorus is so important. I want to say a couple more things about it. And I know I'm doing science class with you, but bear with me. When we're measuring phosphorus, we're measuring on the part per billion level. So if we can have the next slide. This slide gives you a little perspective on part per billion. There's 10.5 billion gallons of water in Little Sebago, give or take a couple. And At the level of phosphorus we have now, there's approximately 1 gallon of phosphorus in the entire lake, spread out over 2,000 acres. So we're talking tiny, tiny amounts of an element that causes big, big problems. And it's amazing that it can cause so much damage when there's so little of it, but that's exactly what's true. Let's go to the next slide. There is some good news because we're talking about such tiny amounts. If we make any changes that eliminate any phosphorus coming into the lake, there's a big impact. So tiny changes make a big difference. And every change matters. So it matters that the property owners replace the trees that they're supposed to plant because they cut down something when they built their house. It matters. And it matters that the lakefront property owner decides to not plant grass and to go with a more natural landscape. That matters. And it matters that the ordinance passes that protects the entire watershed and not just the perimeter of the lake. Those things matter. Every decision that impacts water impacts the lake. Let's go to one more slide. So the association is working hard to eliminate runoff and phosphorus around the lake. We have a new program, it's called Lake Smart. It helps shoreline property owners evaluate their impact of their property on the lake and to prioritize improvements, helping them decrease runoff, which we need. We're updating our watershed survey and assisting in remediating the problem areas that come up in the watershed, so helping folks do that. And last year we added sampling of 10 of the biggest streams that come into the lake. We're trying to see if we could locate sources of phosphorus. This is folks, including Pam, out taking stream samples. And this year we're adding flow measurements to the phosphorus sampling so we can tell exactly how much phosphorus is coming from where. So let's talk briefly about what 3 years of phosphorus testing has shown us. Next slide, please. It's a chart. So this chart on the upper part shows us last summer's testing of the upper basin, and the lower one is last summer's testing of the middle basin for phosphorus. I am going to walk over here and try to show you what we like to see, if this is working. What we like to see is that the level stays below 25 parts per billion. On the chart, this is our 25 line. Here's the 25 line, just in case you can't see it. Most of the samples are below that, which we love. However, in 21 and 22, in the upper basin, the phosphorus levels ran between 5 and 15. Last year, they practically doubled that, and they ran between 10 and 20. So yes, we're still below the acceptable 25, but we see the trend of phosphorus moving up. Also importantly on that chart, on the lower level, there's some spikes at the bottom on the right-hand side. Those spikes are from phosphorus being released from the sediments at the bottom of the lake. It happens under certain conditions when there's low oxygen and high temperature. That's September and October. And so we get a boost of phosphorus that we can't do anything about. I mean, it's a natural process that it gets released from the sediments, but it contributes to our problems. This is one of the reasons we're concerned about this summer. Okay, let me check this. The trend is increasing levels of phosphorus. Even though we're below the limit right now, we're still in what's considered acceptable. We're concerned about what comes next. Let's go to one more slide. So now we're absolutely aware that conditions on Little Sebago are very fragile. It's vital that we protect our water quality to prevent more incidents. We may not be lucky next time, it may not go away quickly. We'd like to strengthen the partnership between the town and the Lake Association in order to better protect the lake. What we've been doing is not enough. We had that demonstrated to us this spring. We're not doing enough. So we're proposing more collaboration, more conversation, more communication between the organizations. Our hope is that today's meeting is merely a prelude to more. We want the goal to be to bring lake water quality to the forefront of mind for each person in both organizations. I'm going to say that again because it's a really big goal. It's to bring lake water quality to the forefront of mind for every person in both organizations. So in every scenario that we face, or every situation, we hope there's certain questions that get asked. If we could do a slide change. The questions are, how is this going to impact the lake? And how is this going to impact the lake? So if we can't easily answer those questions, we need both organizations willing to reach out to each other at any time to work together to give the lake the attention that it deserves. So finally, we're asking that you take a look at your allocation of resources and make some shifts in your priorities based on this new information. I'm going to ask Pam to give you a little more info on what those resource shifts might be. And you have one info.
No, I don't need the other slide.
Okay.
No. This won't be as long as Jan's, but Jan has a wealth of information, and the Lake Association is so blessed to have somebody just take hold of this and blossom. And we just don't want the algae to blossom. So what are the resources to improve water quality in our lakes? And I'm not just speaking of Little Sebago. I'm speaking of all the lakes in the town of Gray. We have Notchwood, we have Forest, and we have Crystal, and we have Little Sebago Lake. And so we need, what are the resources? The town is one resource. We have environmental organizations. We have the Lake Association. We have all the volunteers. All the volunteers that are willing to take time to be able to do all this, bring this information to you, so that there's a little bit of a red flag coming up here. The lake health needs to be, like Jan said, top priority, and we've talked about it in the past, and it's been top and then gone back down. And so this year we need to have it top. As years go by, erosion of our watershed happens, and then we see the problems of the runoff. And there are negative indicators that are happening on our lake right now because of that. So combined with our climate changes that we're having, we're seeing that this action is long overdue. The Lake Coalition that we created, I think it was 3 years ago, have worked together to try to discuss on how we could make some changes all together and propose it to the town. We talked about and had workshops and talked about having a surface water ordinance for protection of phosphorus. And some of the people that were involved with that committee have written ordinances before. And so the town of Wyndham has this ordinance that we are trying to mimic to make sure that the lake of the whole area around Little Sebago is the same for Wyndham as for Gray. And it seems to be working for Wyndham, and I think Wyndham would reach out to the town manager and the council to share their experiences with that. But it should be similar on both sides of the lake. So we changed the verbiage and changed the sections, and it's sitting for, hopefully, I would request that we have some sort of workshop to kind of get this going, because I know we were working with Resiliency Committee with the financing and grant writing, and trying to work with this in parallel and not wait for that financing, because a lot of the work has been done already. So it would be nice to have that workshop with, a committee and be able to move this forward as quickly as possible. Money's always the question, and the town of Gray's been really generous with us. We have a milfoil issue, and they've supported that along with the town of Wyndham, and our membership has really been helpful with that. But money's not always the key, not just handed out during the budget time. The other thing is the budget should provide for proactive programs, be able to allow the code enforcement officers to have time to be able to go out and review some of the ordinances that we're proposing, and be able to feel comfortable that they are not pressured because they've got other things to do. And they've always had other things to do because they've been pressured because there's a lot of things going on. So, we need to have budget for, more code enforcement time, to be able to be proactive around the lake, to be able to be reactive to some of the complaints that have been happening. And above all, what we need really to do is educate. And when they come out for that permit, for that land to be able to build something or do something, hand them the information that's necessary to be able to have knowledge on why it is that we don't cut down all those trees. And if we do, it's a good idea to put some back. Or, there's proactive measures that actually save them money in the long run by, having drip edges and not having to replace the soil that they keep putting down, and it keeps washing into the lake. So we have brochures that we have developed, a lake-friendly brochure that we'd be willing to share. And I would suggest that when we sit down with that committee, that we try to find ways to be able to pass that information on to the people of the town of Gray when they're doing some sort of application. And like Jan said, in ending, I think we need to continue our working relationship that we've had. It's been a great relationship so far. We need more, and we're willing to give more. And I think that it's nice that we utilize the lake associations as a partner, to mutually work together to get a final end goal, because those resources are precious, and they're not going to last long if it continues in the same direction it's going right now. So we do have the water quality report from St. Joseph's that I will share with you and send to you, and certainly Jan will answer the questions for that. I won't be able to do that, but and then I thank you for your time. We thank you for your time, the Lake Association. It's it's not just us. We need all to work together on all lake associations. And lastly, I would like to invite you to our annual meeting, July 13th at the American Legion at 9 o'clock. It will be a different kind of meeting. We're going to share a lot of historical information because we will be 100 years old this summer. We started in September 6 in 1924, and we welcome you to come and see all the agenda items like watershed, water quality, and we have a whole series of pictures and stuff from the past. So it'll be a good event. Thank you. Any questions at all?
Thank you, Pam and Jan. Yeah, I'd like to open it up for questions. Dan, it looks like you have one.
Do you record your annual meeting?
We Zoom, yes, we do Zoom, and I have spoken with the town manager and with Kyle with the possibility of videoing it.
Yeah.
So that we can share it on cable.
Yeah.
So we need to connect those two people and get that going. And we have an IT person from St. Joseph's who's on our board, so they too can talk the lingo.
Yeah, I think that could be
lingo
valuable
with that.
record
So,
to have.
yeah, and that would be good. I think that would be helpful, to the citizens as well.
Dan, go.
Yeah, that was a great presentation, thanks. So, yeah, the surface water quality ordinance, is that the one that we discussed in, okay, in resiliency, yeah. I'm not sure if you got the word, but we've heard that, oh, I guess we can't talk about that yet, sorry, never mind.
Okay.
I'll be in touch with you.
Okay,
separately.
thank you.
Lord.
Yeah, certainly, I was on council when you were here to present those ordinances jointly with the representatives from, I believe it was Wyndham or Falmouth who was here with you. There's a gentleman, or he had
Oh,
written.
no,
he had
the
written.
gentleman, Dennis Brown, he was
Yeah.
from Highland Lake.
Right, and
Yeah,
I
who
remember,
developed the
right,
one
I
from
remember him
Wyndham.
speaking, and it does seem like something we could implement fairly easily since it's already been written up. And so I'm glad you're partnered with Resiliency Committee to get that work
Yeah,
done.
yeah.
And I'm looking forward to the progress on that, so,
We are too.
yeah. Anyone else have questions?
I guess I would just make the comment that you can't, I don't think you can stress too strongly that the issue is the watershed and not necessarily limited to waterfront property, but
Correct.
the entire, development activity in the entire watershed has an impact on the lake. And that's, in my mind, that's the approach we ought to be taking, is a
Right.
watershed approach.
Pretty much the shoreline has been developed, except for they make improvements and they want to expand a little bit. But the second tier and even third tier developments now are making a major impact with a lot of, I'm seeing clear cutting all the way, there's not, what is it, the selective cutting is, I haven't seen a lot of that. So it's the clear cutting that is concerning. And, I understand that it's good to kind of cut some of the trees down because they had their time, but not all of them. And it does make an impact coming.
I think the education piece will be critical, especially, as Matthew pointed out, I think a lot of people think of the watershed as just being right up on the lake, and I think if we can educate people that, their yard a mile or two away from the lake, if any work they're doing there or pesticides they're applying goes directly to the lake, a lot of people, I think, probably don't quite understand how far away you can be and still impact lake quality.
That lake-friendly brochure that we have, it talks about dogs, picking up after your dogs, and even just, walking your dog on the side of the road, it eventually gets to the lake. So
Yeah.
you have, it's all that information that can be shared.
Right, right. And I think, certainly we can partner with you on that, newsletters and other avenues we have to communicate with our residents, so.
Great, that'd be perfect.
Dan?
It might be worth, because obviously, a big chunk of the lake's watershed is in Raymond. Expanding the conversation perhaps to include them somehow. Also, there are a lot of road associations throughout that watershed that that don't necessarily have waterfront property. Most of those associations have their annual meetings during the summer. I don't know if you've thought about attending some of those and having a.
Yep, we kind of stretch thin sometimes, but what we
I
try.
can- yeah, I appreciate that.
We try to, members on the board that have the road associations, they bring information to them and share that information. And we also have, I gave you last
Yep.
fall's newsletter. The other one just hit.
Came in the mail today.
Did it really?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll get the ones that, I'll get a few down to the town office so they can pass those around. But yeah, that's our centennial edition. So.
I mean, we might be able to get Raymond may have some knowledge of what the road associations are in that part of town. Even just sending them a letter with a copy of the brochure to whoever the president of those associations are would be a little bit of outreach.
I have an aerial view of the, of Raymond bogs and
Yeah.
feeder streams that come from Raymond. It's pretty
Well, there's the
impressive.
old town dump that,
Yeah.
on the other side of Farwell Bog, that we know is a problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so
very
much for the time tonight.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Oh, did you have a
appreciate it.
comment, Jan?
No,
No.
that was news to me, so.
Oh,
I can show you on a map if you want.
yeah, okay. Thank you.
Now that you're neighbors.
Just across the water there. You can't get to her house from my house.
Thank you again for coming in.
Yes, good night.
Appreciate your time. Okay, so next up is action items. Sorry, one sec. Actually looking for a motion for, oh, actually, no, I was thinking the other one was first. I'm looking for a motion to authorize changes, or excuse me, for the Greytown Council to repeal the short-term rental ordinance, Chapter 390.
So moved.
Second.
So just a little background on this. The council adopted this short-term rental ordinance in the fall of 2022 in an effort to get a handle on how many short-term rental properties were in the town, and what that would, how that might impact the availability of rental housing and also just homes in town, because that can significantly impact the affordability of properties for year-round residents. There was no, license or fees involved in this. It was strictly just a registry so we could get a handle on, or was there a fee? Excuse me. Yeah, there was a small $50 fee. I apologize. There was a small $50 registration fee so that we could get a handle on, again, how many properties this might apply to. However, it was incredibly difficult to enact and follow through with, especially with our limited staff and time. And there wasn't a lot of participation in the ordinance. And since we adopted this, we've also been informed of some regional resources that would basically accomplish this without requiring residents to register. So there are some resources available, particularly software programs that allow for us to track short-term rental listings and can give us a picture of how many are in gray at one time. So we might be pursuing that as an option for an alternative. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts on this repeal?
Is there a way I can share my screen fairly easily?
Yeah.
If you might have to log into the
I
meeting.
would have to, no, never mind.
Yeah.
Yes, currently, I sent an email around, I circulated to people. When was it? In January, I guess it was, at some point in time. There are about just under 100 short-term rental. Oh, no, that's all right, thank you though, appreciate it. Currently in gray, when I first look at the map that GPCOG created, basically what they did, they've created a function whereby they have a website that scrapes all of the rentals from Airbnb and VRBO and some of the other sites. Originally there were 63. So the number is definitely increasing over a relatively short period of time. One of the reasons that we were interested when people were interested in creating the ordinance is that there are a lot fewer owner rentals or occupants on the lake than there used to be at one point in time, and there's a lot more property that's rented out. So we have issues and complaints like with fireworks and animals and some of the other things. So it was just a kind of an attempt to get a grip on that, but we hadn't been able to really implement the ordinance, and I don't think it makes sense to have an ordinance that on the books that we're just not going to use or do anything about. So
Right.
we haven't had a lot of complaints, so I think it makes sense to repeal this and just regroup if we do get some complaints. Or I don't know, at some point in time, I think you have to actually subscribe to GPCOG's website. That may be something worth looking into, just so that we can keep an eye on things.
Yeah, so this first year, the software you're referring to was a pilot year, and any towns participating this year were free, but next year they were going to start charging a fee. However, there are some corporate versions of a similar software that are much more expensive, so they would charge a reduced rate. I think I forget what the percentage was, but it was basically going to be a percentage of what you would normally charge for a corporate version of the software, but it was much lower than
Yeah,
anything.
so I mean, it might be something to consider at some future date. But that's all I have. I think it makes sense at this point to repeal it.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? No? Okay, I will go to vote. Anne?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Marty?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. I don't know how many people have submitted a registration, Mike, since zero, okay.
There have been no registrations.
Right, because I was going to say we should reach out to anybody who has been doing it, that they no longer need to, but sounds like we,
not aware of
don't need
any.
to do. Okay, so next, I'm actually looking to table the next motion, and we will revisit it at a future date. So we're tabling approval of the proposed changes to the Town of Gray personnel policy.
So moved.
Second.
And we do need to vote on the tabling, right? Yeah, okay. Matthew?
Yes.
Marty?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. And just for those watching, if you'd like to understand what we were potentially voting on here that we've tabled, the workshop prior to this, the majority of that was spent discussing those potential changes. Okay, next up is report from council chair. It's my last one for this session, at least. First, I want to take a minute to thank Martin Meany, here to my left, Councilor Martin Meany,
Thank
for
you.
his service the last 3 years. His term is up, and he has chosen not to run again, but we certainly appreciate his time. And you've always been reliable voice here on the council, in your chair when you need to be, and we appreciate your time and energy
Thank you.
the last 3 years. Also want to note a thank you to the American Legion for hosting the Memorial Day Parade. It was a really great turnout, and there were a lot of participation from many organizations and individuals, including many from town staff, including Michael Foley, who made a wonderful speech at the Legion following the parade. And it's a great tradition here in town. My kids enjoy, and I also enjoy, and it's a great way to honor the fallen service members who've honored our country with their lives. I want to remind everybody of Election Day, June 11th, next week. We have municipal elections. There's also some primary voting for state legislature positions, and our budget, and also the school's budget. And then once we conclude with the elections next week, the council will reconvene on June 18th for the next session. And I just want to note that also Representative Annie Graham has requested to come speak with us about the last legislative session, and we've set aside time at the July meeting for her to attend, which I believe we have, as of last year, moved to the the third Tuesday of the month, which will be July 16th. That's all I have for chair report. Mike, did you have something for?
Sure.
Your report.
For the town manager's report, just wanted to mention that yesterday, myself, along with Councilor McGuire and Councilor Height, visited the Bridgeton wastewater treatment plant. This is a photo up the hill from the treatment plant. Ironically, this treatment plant is on a hill, so they pump the wastewater up the hill. And then further up the hill behind this photo is where the affluent discharge, or the water that comes post the process, is put out into a field that grows grass there. And so this is a unique small treatment plant that services the town of Bridgeton, and in the town's exploration of potentially having wastewater treatment either in the village or somewhere in part of town. We wanted to learn a little bit about this and the process that Bridgeton went through. It was a very informative tour, and very informative about the process in general. And so we look forward to learning more about others. Wyndham is currently in the process of building a wastewater treatment plant, which is actually a different style treatment plant than this one that's here. And then also Oxford built a treatment plant, which is similar to the Wyndham one that's under construction, that we're going to hope to try to organize a tour to maybe visit that in the near future as well, so we can have some general knowledge about that. If others are interested in visiting or learning more about it, happy to to share some information. But this facility in particular is more of like a smaller scale facility, similar to one that would be in communities like Portland or Westbrook or Falmouth. It's a smaller scale version to support a smaller town. And ironically, Bridgeton had a wastewater system for gray water in place before for some properties. So they did couple an investment in their downtown and the investment in those already existing infrastructure to be able to support this new system. So that was very informative, and looking forward to learning more about it in the future. And then just want to remind everyone about open positions we currently have here in the town. Transfer station, firefighter ETs, some seasonal recreation positions, and then some positions at the library. And then want to remind everyone about our extended hours that went into effect at the beginning of May. Everything seems to be going very well. We haven't heard any concerns from members of the community. I don't believe anyone else has. So the hours have been working out very well, and we look forward to, if we need to make any tweaks to those in the future, that we may consider that as well.
Has anyone taken you up on the offer to have like an appointment on Friday? I know you mentioned that was.
I don't think anyone has done that
Yeah.
yet. Not that code enforcement has told me,
Right,
but
okay.
they may have. That's just some flexibility we're offering if we have a lot of rainy weather and the Friday is the only good day for weather or something like that. So we're working with our contractors and those who might be concerned how best to accommodate them when we can. So I think that flexibility is helpful. And then I wanted to let everybody know about the Gray Water District rate increase. So they had shared with town staff prior to my arrival to budget a 10% increase in water rates. And so they filed an application with the Public Utilities Commission to increase their rates. And the average rate increase is actually 38% and not 10%. As they had advised us to budget for. And the fire protection rate, which is the largest expense that we have for water within the municipal budget, of 27%. So I'm concerned about that from a municipal budget perspective, given the fact that we only budgeted 10%. So I'll have to monitor that throughout the budget and maybe make adjustments. Should the budget be passed, make adjustments in other accounts to accommodate for this increase. They do have a public hearing that's on June 20th. I believe it's at the library. I haven't been able to get a lot of details about it in particular, but there's also a process with the Public Utilities Commission, and so I'll be working to potentially submit some with the council's, if there's no objections from the council, submit some comment to that process with concern about the rate increase, given that we didn't properly prepare for that. I've reached out to the water district. This is my analysis of the previous rates, which appear to be this increase, and I've asked am I reading them wrong, to let me know if I'm reading them wrong, and if there's anything that they can do to help the town, given that we didn't budget for what they're proposing as that rate increase. So I'll keep everyone posted on that and work on submitting the appropriate feedback regarding how that impacts the town. And then just wanted to let everybody know, a couple of meetings ago, we had selected an audit firm that we agreed to move forward with. And given the public backlash from that selection, the auditor decided they didn't want to conduct business with the town. And so we're back to square one and trying to find an appropriate firm. Thankfully, we have one that that's reviewing our information. As I've identified before, we're not an ideal audit client. We're making ourselves more ideal. We have the help of a former auditor who's helping us to fix financial issues, and so we're hoping that at some point soon we'll be an ideal audit candidate, and then you'll be able to see when we have an audit of the fixes that we made, you'll be able to see the progress that we have with our newer finance staff and a new town manager to be able to reflect on that. So that firm, like I said, they did decide to move on and chose not to conduct business with the town, given the public feedback about them. And then as the chair mentioned, Election Day is on June 11th. For anyone that's coming and has questions about the budget, I'll be available at the polls to answer any questions about the budget, have information about the budget. We did have a budget flyer that has been received in most homes, and we will be sure to answer any specific questions, and like I said, I'll be available that day. If anyone has any questions but between now and then, be sure to reach out, and happy to help anyone understand that information. And all of our budget information is on the town's website. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, I'll go to committee reports. Matthew, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So since our last meeting, the Gray Community TV Committee meeting was canceled. So go to that. Library trustees met on May 28th, and the library director, Josh, told us about this. There's the changes to the van delivery service that's related to the library exchange service, which is going to perhaps have some significant impact on that library exchange service. I don't know the details. He sent some, but it's something pretty significant to the library interlibrary loan service. And then on the 3rd, I went to Bridgeton with the town manager, and the Dry Mills School Committee also met on the 3rd, and the Recreation Committee met on the 3rd, and I put in an appearance at all those things. The Dry Mills Schoolhouse is looking to have their first classroom session on June 12th. The Rec Committee is pursuing this pump track idea with the school department. We have develop a pump track near the Libby Hill Trails trailhead, and there's a fair amount of grant money and things like that available, I guess, and it sounds like a pretty exciting idea, and the Rec Committee is working with the school department on that.
What's a pump track?
Oh, well, a pump track is, it's a good question, because I had no idea until it was brought up to the committee. It's basically a bicycle course that has, like humps in it, essentially, that mimic or are good training for mountain bike riding. So it's a good way to become acclimated to the G-forces and the like that you would encounter mountain biking, but in a more controlled, sort of training setting where,
Okay.
So basically that's the idea. I'm probably the people that know about it are horrified at my description of it.
No, it's good. It's helpful.
Let's see, and then, I think that's it. We also at the Rec Committee discussed the contra dance that was held at the New Begin Gin on June 1st, which was a big success.
Great.
And there'll be another one on August 3rd.
Well, okay, write it down. All right, Marty?
Okay, I just have one. The committee meeting for the Wild Blueberry Festival that was scheduled for tomorrow night at 6:30 has been canceled and will be rescheduled for this month soon.
Okay,
That's all I've got.
all right, thank you. Dan?
Planning Board will be meeting on the 13th at 7 PM to discuss, they'll have a public hearing to discuss some zoning changes, I think specifically around the ADU ordinance. The ZBA does have a meeting, sort of a placeholder for a meeting at 7 PM on the 26th, but they do not have an agenda yet.
Okay. Ann?
I actually have no committee reports.
All right.
I mean, this meeting.
No. It's the summer, people are busy.
Didn't meet, well, but, yeah, I should say that Open Space meets next week, and so does Resiliency, and the Village Transformation Project also meets next Wednesday.
Okay. I will, as long as the election goes my way, will be attending the Ordinance Advisory Committee meeting on June 27th. Doug, in planning, was originally intending to have some further joint meetings with the Ordinance Advisory Committee, Open Space Committee, and Planning Board. I think there's been some scheduling snafus with that, so I think he's looking to adjust by making some suggested edits and then seeking input. And the Ordinance Advisory Committee will reconvene on that process for the zoning map on June 27th. The Greater Portland Council of Governments held its annual summit last Thursday, I believe it was. And where they presented the new strategic plan that goes through 2030. They're offering a lot more member services in particular, which I'm encouraging the town to certainly pursue. Anything we might be able to use GPCOG for or partner with them on with our member dues. At the summit, I was also elected president of the GPCOG Executive Committee, and Mary Fernandez will continue as second president, and Misha Pride of South Portland will be, I'm getting the terms wrong. Mary Fernandez is first vice president, and Misha Pride is second vice president. So those meetings for the GPCOG Executive Committee will reconvene in the fall. And that's all I had for committee reports.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I will move on to correspondence, activities, and any updates you have on council priorities. Ann, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I have no updates at all, no correspondence or activities.
Dan?
As Mike said, I attended the trip to Bridgeton with Mike and Matthew. I found it very interesting. I think it is a kind of technology that, we certainly could see developed here in Gray. I did send everybody an email sort of forwarding something I had sent out before about some newer technology. Who knows, what path we're on for the number of years it'll be before, and the technology is quickly evolving. So, but it was good from the standpoint of understanding sort of their process, how they worked, reached out to the community. What they found were the important things that people wanted to hear and understand as part of building support for the system. So that was all very valuable. And then I also attended the GPCOG annual meeting over at St. Joe's. And it was pretty clear that they're seem to be supercharging the things that they want to be able to offer the community. So I think we should look to take advantage of that.
Sure.
But other than that, I think that's all that I had.
Okay, great. Marty?
No correspondence from me.
Matthew?
Yeah, I just would mention that in Mike's words, I got to geek out on wastewater in Bridgeton on Monday, so that was enjoyable for me. And as you probably all know, I ditched the GPCOG Summit at the last minute because of the work conflict. So that's on my correspondence.
That's great. Who gave you the tour in Bridgeton? Was it the town manager there, or did you?
It was the town manager, the public services administrator, and the community development director, and their consulting engineer.
Oh, okay.
So it was a very thorough and detailed tour.
Oh, okay.
And there was the wastewater operator was there as well. So
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
and myself and Dan took some